There have been a total of 41 goalkeepers that have played in the Championship this season, and in today's video we're going to be ranking them all based on the number of goals they've prevented so far this season. So the way this stat is worked out is it's post-shot expected goals minus the amount of goals that a goalkeeper has actually conceded, and that gives us an overall figure of how many goals either a goalkeeper has prevented or theoretically been at fault for. If you did go to enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like, but without any further ado, let's jump into this one. And can begin at the bottom of the ranking. In 41st place we have Reading's Joe Lumley with a -10 on his goals prevented this season. Now coincidentally, Lumley's actually been a fairly popular figure from what I've seen within the Reading fan base, but based on pure statistics this season, he has been by far and away the worst goalkeeper in the Championship. It's not been a great season when it comes to Wigan's goalkeeping department. Jamie Jones is in 40th place with a -9.1 in terms of his prevented goals, and it doesn't get much better for Ben Amos, the other Wigan shot stopper, who's in 39th place with a post-shot expected goals of -8.5 this season. Still in the negative numbers, in 38th place we have Cardiff City's Ryan Allsop with a -6.5 in terms of goals prevented this season. It has been a real slog of a season so far for Cardiff, and Allsop's numbers don't show up too greatly on this one. David Button was having an absolute howler at the start of the season, and he's coming in with a -5.4 in terms of goals prevented. Literally every shot he was faced with was going in. He's no longer their number one, and these statistics back up why that's the case. Swansea City have sort of been chopping and changing their goalkeeping department this season. Stephen Bender's actually coming in 36th place with -5.2 in terms of prevented goals this season. Swansea have had quite a few mishaps since Russell Martin's been in charge, really, of giving away cheap goals from playing out at the back, and Bender's obviously been a victim of that. In previous seasons gone by, Shenny Dieng's shown up really well for this statistic, but this season not so much, which was interesting. He's in 35th place with a -4.6 in terms of goals prevented this season, which isn't great when we'll get up to some of those other higher shot stoppers in the league. Stoke were in desperate need of revamping their goalkeeping department. Joe Bursick ended up leaving in the January window, and he's in 34th place on today's video with a -4.6 in terms of goals prevented this season. Just seemed like Championship football maybe had come a little bit too soon for him. And to be fair, Jack Bonham's not fared all too much better in net for Stoke this season, as he's in 33rd place with a -4.2 in terms of goals prevented this season. All things considered, not been a great season so far for Stoke goalkeepers. And Luton Town have kept 10 clean sheets in the Championship so far this season, but Ethan Horvath is still in the negatives when it comes to goals prevented overall so far this season, with a -3.6 to his name when it comes to the XG numbers. Zach Stefan in at Middlesbrough, been a little bit of an opinion splitter. Obviously came with quite a big reputation on loan from Manchester City, and has been a little bit hit and miss for Borough in terms of his overall shot stopping abilities. I do think there are some gaps in his ability there. So far this season he's got a -3.0 in terms of goals prevented. It's a shame that Daniel Bentley is no longer in the Championship. He's been a great goalkeeper in years gone by. He did lose his first team spot at Bristol City partway through the year, perhaps as a result of him having a -2.6 in terms of goals prevented this season. Now playing for Wolves, he'll be on backup duty for them. Next up, in 29th place we have George Long. Gary Rowett made quite the bold decision partway through the season to drop Bartosz Białkowski as Millwall's number one, and instead bring in George Long for that added bit of distribution, which I suppose is a strong suit to Long's game. In terms of shot stopping though, it is Białkowski who ranks better on this list, as Long's coming in with a -2.1 in terms of goals prevented. Only Coventry have kept more clean sheets than Preston North End in the Championship this season, but despite that, Freddie Woodman is actually in the negatives when it comes to goals prevented this season. Woodman absolutely fantastic in those first few months of the season when Preston literally weren't conceding any goals. Since that point, our defence has been significantly more leaky, and perhaps Woodman hasn't quite been at that same level he once was, or has not been afforded that same protection. Speaking of Coventry, Simon Moore started out the season as their number one goalkeeper, but dropped several clangers and was soon dropped after that. He's got a -1.6 in terms of goals prevented this season. For what it's worth, I do think that Anthony Patterson is having a good season for Sunderland, and he is growing into this season, but he's still coming in with a negative number when it comes to goals prevented in the Championship, -1.4 for the Sunderland shot stopper this season. Liam Roberts in at Middlesbrough has only been afforded a handful of matches this season 4 appearances in the Championship. In that time, he's got a negative 1.2 in terms of goals prevented, but not had all too much action. In 24th place, we then have Wes Foderingham with a negative 1.2 in terms of goals prevented this season. I found this one really interesting because based off the exact same statistics from last season, he was actually the 3rd best goalkeeper in the Championship in terms of goals prevented, but has massively dropped down the pecking order this time. Dean Bouzanis has only played a handful of matches for Reading so far this season when Lumley's been out of the frame. 4 appearances in total. He's got a negative of 1.2 in terms of goals prevented. Next then, and in 22nd place, we have Coventry City's Ben Wilson. His numbers will have been massively impacted by the fact that Coventry have been a really weird defensive unit this season, where they've either kept things incredibly tight or they've been massively open. They have kept more clean sheets than any other Championship side up until this point though, with 13. They have also conceded 31 goals so far, and Wilson has a negative 1.1 in terms of goals prevented. Harvey Eisted at Luton is marginally in the negatives, negative 0.4 for goals prevented. He's only played 2 matches for Luton this season, with Horvath playing the majority of minutes. In 20th place, we've got Nathan Baxter with a negative 0.4 on prevented goals. Been a shame that he picked up that injury when he did, ultimately only meaning that he's made 12 appearances for Hull this season in the Championship. In 19th place, we've got Swansea City's Andy Fisher with a negative 0.1 on prevented goals. He's boosted massively by the fact that he saved that penalty against Blackpool, and so his prevented goal tally will have taken a big jump in the right direction for that one. He did lose the number 1 spot at Swansea partway through the season though, and obviously Bender's been in since. In 18th place, we got Nichols Balakapic, who's been stepping in at Huddersfield in the absence of Lee Nichols recently. Just the 3 appearances this season in the Championship. Overall, he's got prevented goals of 0.1. In 17th place, we've then got Bristol City's Max O'Leary, and he's the only goalkeeper in the Championship to have conceded his exact post-shot expected goal. So he's got a goals prevented tally of exactly 0. No other Championship goalkeepers got that. He's had a post-shot expected goals against him of 17 this season, and he's conceded exactly 17 goals. Our first positive of the video is Alex Palmer, who's prevented 0.2 goals so far this season. We spoke about David Button earlier in the video, but he had a really torrid time early on for West Brom, and Alex Palmer's definitely stepped things up in the goalkeeping department. In 15th place, we then have Norwich City's Tim Krul coming in with a prevented goals of 0.2 this season. Norwich have, quite the option when it comes to their goalkeeping department to be able to pick between Tim Krul and Angus Gunn, 2 of the best in the league. That's an absolutely stacked squad in that area. Jordan Missett in at Sheffield United only played 12 minutes of league football this season, but in that time he prevented 0.3 goals this season, so he makes it in at 14. Daniel Bachmann in at Watford has brought a net positive to that side when it comes to prevented goals. He's prevented 0.5 goals so far this season. Watford been a little bit up and down this season when it comes to their defensive record, but Bachmann generally has been fairly consistent with shot stopping. In 12th place, we've got Burnley's Bailey Peacock Farrell, another goalkeeper who's not played all too much football so far this season, but in the limited game time that he has had, he has prevented 0.6 goals. We've got another backup goalkeeper in 11th place. That's Adam Davis of Sheffield United. He's prevented 0.7 goals in the Championship this season. Obviously, he was in net for that bonkers FA Cup tie that Sheffield United had against Wrexham, ended in that 3-3 draw. Into the top 10 we go. In 10th place, we have Chris Maxwell of Blackpool. Now, there's been quite the debate in the Blackpool fan base this season around who should be their starting goalkeeper. They've got Chris Maxwell as that more experienced option, and someone else who we'll discuss in due course. Maxwell this season has prevented 1.2 goals in the Championship. And what's quite timely is the fact that we've got Daniel Grimshaw, also of Blackpool, in 9th place on today's video, who's also gone ahead and prevented 1.2 goals this season. So statistically, there's really been nothing between Maxwell and Grimshaw this season, but I'm sure the debate will continue to rage on in the Blackpool fan base over who should be their starting goalkeeper. In 8th place, we've got Muric in at Burnley. They've obviously been really strong at the back so far this season, and Muric is just an absolutely towering goalkeeper. So far this season, he's prevented 1.3 goals in the Championship. You can tell just how much he's developed since we last saw him out on loan in the Championship with Nottingham Forest. In 7th place we have Millwall's Bartosz Białkowski, one of the most consistent shot stoppers over these last few years in the Championship. Has lost his place in that Millwall side to George Long, but the statistics actually back up Białkowski as being a better shot stopper this season. In the 10 league matches he's played this season, he's prevented 1.9 goals for Millwall this season, which is impressive. In 6th place we have Rotherham United's Victor Johansson, who's prevented 2.9 goals in net for Rotherham this season. Johansson has faced by far and away the most shots of any Championship goalkeeper this season. He's faced 153 in total, and yeah, he's been kept on his toes, but overall bringing in a massive net positive. Into the top 5 we go. In 5th place we've got Birmingham's John Ruddy. Turned out to be a great bit of business by Blues in the summer to pick him up on a free transfer, considering the fact that he hadn't played all too much first team football. You know, he's been sat on the bench for the past few years of his career. Come back into the limelight of Birmingham and been brilliant so far, preventing 3 goals this season. Coming in 4th place we then have Blackburn Rovers shot stopper Thomas Kaminski, who's prevented a total of 3.1 goals this season. Now I would say that Kaminski's individual form has probably tailed off over this last month or so. Certainly in that cup game last time out he wasn't at his best, although over those first few months of the season when Blackburn were ridiculously up and down, he was by far and away their most consistent player, and preventing over 3 goals this season is certainly no easy going. Fair play to Matt Ingram in at Hull City as well. Really had to fight and battle to be Hull's number 1. Obviously got even more competition in there now with the signing of Carl Darlow, but statistically he's been the 3rd best goalkeeper in the Championship this season, overall preventing 3.9 goals this season, which is absolutely massive stuff. Obviously Hull's defensive record has massively improved since Rossini has come in. You know, prior to that they had one of the worst defensive records in the Championship, but Ingram's been good for his money this year. It has been an awful season for Huddersfield so far, but Lee Nichols still ranks as one of the best goalkeepers in the Championship, coming in with a prevented 4.3 goals this season. Where would they be without him? Obviously he is missing from that Huddersfield squad at the moment, and they are badly lacking in his absence, but last season he was undoubtedly one of the signings of the season, absolutely instrumental in Huddersfield making it to the playoffs, and this season, even despite their struggles, he's still been really good. But claiming the number 1 spot as the best goalkeeper in the Championship this season statistically, it's Norwich City's Angus Gunn, who's prevented a massive 5.4 goals this season based on expected goals. Now, quite harshly so, Gunn's actually been demoted down to the number 2 since Wagner's been in, as he's opted for the more experienced Tim Krul in there. Obviously Tim Krul, fantastic goalkeeper, but going off the stats this season, Gunn has been head and shoulders above Krul in terms of an overall shot stopper, and he ranks above all other Championship goalkeepers as the best in the league this season. Well guys, there we have it. There was every Championship goalkeeper and how they rank from worst to best in terms of goals prevented this season. If you did go on to enjoy, make sure to leave a like, and if you'd like to see any other deep dives into any stats for each position ranked, do let me know down below. Apart from that guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.